Right, I think it might get a bit noisy out there, Jack, but it
true.
has
Yes,
been incredibly wet today, and you have had your work cut out. I mean, we found that race here so exciting. How was it for you?
Well, it was a bit mental, wasn't it? It was a bit concerned about getting half a dozen finishes across the line, really, because as James Whittam kept pointing out, when conditions are as treacherous as that, there's no knowing at any split second when it's going to go wrong, and when you've got riders of that kind of calibre getting caught out, you know, the conditions are about as nasty as they could get. And it was proven by Jake Dixon, because the other guy said afterwards, wow, he was just sticking his neck out there, and they felt they couldn't quite go with it. And lo and behold, his lead lasted half a lap. It's absolutely treacherous, really.
Yeah, and how difficult is it to know who's going to make it through, who's going to take the risks, who's going to go off, who's going to stay on? How hard is that? Well,
I think there are always riders who can go well in those conditions, and you know beforehand generally who are the people who are going to look strong. You know that the Richard Coopers and the Christian Iddens are liable, even Iddens, the state of his collarbone is ridiculous.
Yeah.
One half of it's down here, and the other half's up here. How on earth the man is riding is beyond us, really. And you also know that Brygman has learned, because we've seen him perform miracles in the wet before. O'Halloran, because all the Australians go up on, they don't just ride dirt tracks, they put oil on them to make them even slicker. So conditions like this, they're always going to be happy in. So you can kind of have a fair idea who's liable to push themselves to the front. And that's the way it proved, really. The real shock was probably Brooks. He must have had some sort of problem from the way that he dropped downfield. But generally speaking, the guys that we thought would be near the front were.
Well, we've got one of the chaps in here who's an ex-rider, used to ride in 750s, Terry over here. He leant across to me during that race and he goes, "You watch Ellison, he's going to be on the podium."
Yes.
And then a corner later, he was in the gravel at Paddock Hill, and it's so hard to tell, isn't it?
Yes. And well, at that point, Ellison had set a string of fastest laps, and he closed a huge gap to get up with the top 5.
Yeah.
And I think I'd said to Whittam, I think he could win this, and that was a few moments before he went down. But that's how close you can get to the edge, and hopefully gauge it so you don't overstep the mark. But
so Terry, you're in good company there. What do you think it is that's going through a rider's mind at that point? Is it that they're, as you say, they're stitching together a sequence of fastest laps and they think, yeah, marginal gain, I can just get a bit more here, I can get a bit more there?
I think you might be better off asking James or one of the other boys, or Terry, what that feels like. Because it must be, when you can see the gap shrinking as fast as that, then you must think, I've got this, I can get through. If I keep going on these laps and if I feel safe doing this speed, then I'm going to catch these guys.
Now we've got a few questions from some of our guests, if I might ask them.
Yeah.
And I remember the last time you were with us, we had Lynn ask a fabulous question about what was your biggest slip-up. But we've done that one. Now Melissa said, when you're up there in the commentary box, do you have like a fact sheet, a crib sheet, or is it all stored in your head?
It's a mixture of the two. It's there's you can hardly call them crib sheets. Whittam calls it my clutter. I have a kind of folder for each race category. I have rider biogs and scribbled notes, and I never throw anything away. So I've got ridiculously old biog sheets from years gone by on people who've been around a long time, like Michael Laverty, who sadly might be leaving us after today. And I've got stuff on MLAV going back to when he was a boy racing 125s and things. So I'm a hoarder. I never chuck anything away, but I just kind of update stuff, especially at the beginning of the season, revamp everything, and also it's intriguing because when you're looking at stuff like that, there's always stuff that you haven't known about someone. Little things jump out at you and you think, never knew that about him. So that lodges in your mind as well. And it's liable to come out at a hopefully opportune moment, but sometimes an entirely inopportune moment.
So it's a combination of clutter and what's stored up here?
Yeah, and the clutter in here.
Yeah. Now Martin, who we've got with us today, who knows his stuff on track, most recently has raced in the British touring cars.
Yeah.
He asks, who should we watch in 2019? You know, what are the big names because there's some big changes
Yes.
occurring.
Yes.
We've had the Superbikes where we've had those big names in the series for some significant
Yes.
period of time,
Yeah.
and it seems to be all change at the top. So, what's going to change?
What's going to change is obviously Glenn Irwin going to Kawasaki is going to be interesting because he was given a very unexpected opportunity by Paul Bird 3 years ago when he was signed up for Ducati. Leon Haslam's going, Jake Dixon's going. Dixon's replacement is going to be this kid Ryan Vickers. Now that's a big punt to take a lad who's dominated stock 600 and put him onto a 1000cc superbike, but he's rated very, very highly, so it'll be interesting to see how quickly they can bring him on. Brad Ray is actually going off to Suzuka. The Japanese think so highly of him, they're putting him in the last round of the All Japan Superbike Championship in 2 weeks' time at Suzuka. On a full factory spec bike, on Bridgestone tyres, which he loves, much better than this Pirelli rubber that they run on here. He's looking forward to that. He's an exciting prospect for next season. Taron McKenzie has come on really strong in the latter half of the season. If it wasn't for that nasty little warm-up crash he had this morning, then obviously he'd be running up front. And I think he's going to be a real prospect. He's staying at McCann's Yamaha, that's definite. There's all sorts of intriguing movements because there's two teams who have got nobody signed yet, Honda and Tyco BMW. So we have no idea what's happening with them. We do know what we shouldn't know, and you're the first people to know. So let's let the cat out of the bag that Luke Mossey is rejoining the man who really brought him on in Superbikes, his crew chief Ray Stringer at OMG Suzuki. They're going to run a two-man team next year. He reckons that the second rider, or the other rider, isn't going to be Gino Ria. So I'm thinking, oh right, I thought that was a cert. Yeah. So we don't really, there's a lot of teams, a lot of changes. Very strong rumour that Jason O'Halloran is going to McCann's Yamaha alongside Taron McKenzie. So there's all sorts of shifts going on. And of course people like O'Halloran, the guys who are now 30, the experienced guys, with the exception of Christian Inn, who came into tarmac racing very late on. He's still like a kid even though he's in his 30s. And we don't know where Christian's going, no decisions have been taken at Tyco BMW. So I think there's a whole load to look forward to of old and young, experienced and youth in the championship next year.
So I like that expression, a kid in his 30s. But we've all met a few of those.
Yeah.
What would your advice be for Jake Dixon going into MotoGP? Because we've seen a few riders go in there and think, it's worked out for some of them, but for some of them it hasn't. 2 or 3 bits of advice.
I'm not in a position to offer any motorcycle racer advice, honestly, Paul. All I can hope for that he's going. We know he's going into a good team, an established team, and he'll need a good dose of good fortune because he's. It's this funny conundrum with his crew chief, Glenn Richards, bless him, who's been flying backwards and forwards from Melbourne. He now has a big patch of ranch outside Melbourne. He's married this lovely lady just a matter of a couple of months ago. She's actually just had a miscarriage and was in hospital this week. She came out of hospital in time for him to come over here, but he only arrived on Friday night. So he was actually communicating with Jake, advising him on suspension changes by text when he was 40,000 feet up in the air on the way over. And Glenn Richards is very much in demand. Jake would like to keep on working with him. Other teams would like him to stay here in the Superbike paddock, including Lee Hardy at RAF Reserves and regular Kawasaki. And also, people want him in the Australian Superbike Championship, so everything's up in the air for him. He'd like to stay at home. That was what he'd really like to do. But and he's trying to persuade Jake that Jake's got a ready-made crew, a really experienced crew that have worked in MotoGP and really know what they're doing. So he's trying to say to Jake, look, I don't mind coming to the flyer rounds that are relatively local to where I live in Australia, just to be by your side, but this is a really good crew you're going into Moto2 with, so have faith in them, see how it works out.
And I think that's key, isn't it? Having a really good crew with you. Now, let's come back to British Superbikes, PBM. People have been talking about this dream team for 2019. Now, you hear kind of rumours behind the scenes, and you'll know about this, and feel free to say that you're not able to comment, but might there be might there have been tensions between their riders who, for next year, in the past, that might come to the fore?
I honestly don't know, except that people who know much better than me, like the Whittams and others of this world, have said that yes, there have been tensions, as you so sweetly put it, between Reading and Brooks in the past. So I'm not sure where they've actually come to, where their paths have crossed. But honestly, there are so many different career paths these guys take that it's fascinating how often they may have crossed paths at odd times in the past. They're both pretty opinionated, headstrong individuals. It's going to be interesting in the garage next year.
You say someone in motorsport opinionated and headstrong. That's quite a rare thing, surely.
Well, it's surprising how rarely you come across it amongst motorcycle sportsmen. I find they're often quietly spoken, fairly reticent people until they get onto a racetrack.
Right, last couple of questions. One from me, and then one from Colin, who's in here. Now, I think we briefly mentioned this. Now and again, things happen in commentary that are unintended. And
now and then. Did you hear me going blooming apoplectic when I saw the third rerun of Jake Dixon's crash, and I thought it was somebody else going down. We said, no, calm down. It's Jake again.
It's a shame they can't do like a 20-minute, sort of 20-second loop on that, and you can just edit that out, so it's a bit smoother. But there was a race, and you were commentating on an Italian, I think it was Roberto, someone or other, and he had started near the back of the grid, and he'd been making fantastic progress. And you made a comment, something along the lines of, who's he going to knock off next? Which was a perfectly reasonable comment. Perfectly reasonable. But the producer then cut, I believe, to a shot of his wife, or someone else's wife rather, in the garage. Do you recall that?
No.
You don't?
Thankfully not. I suspect it was probably Marco Malandria and that fairly striking wife of his. Would be my suspicion, but it might have been Robbie Rolfo had a fabulous lady as well. It might have been him. Yeah, there are Italian possibilities, legion Italian possibilities.
So among that clutter, it seems that you've got some images as well.
Well, images when they're thrust in front of you like that by some uncompromising director. Yes.
But I'm not sure who was your co-commentator, but they then paused because it was supposed to go to them, and you had to pick up on it. So what I'll do is I will find the link and we'll post it out so that you can have a listen into that. I'm not sure who was with you. Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. Well,
it might have been James.
Well, he's caught me often enough, hasn't he? I mean, he reduces me to fits of mirth at times, so I'm actually incapable of speech anyway. So you've got to accept that happens with Whittam regularly.
Well, we did have a question come in. We asked over the internet, and we said we'd ask the best question, and we had a question that came in that said, "Are you aware of Burnicle bingo?"
No, I'm not. I've been told. I'm aware of it because I've been told about it by my rampaging social media colleagues. Yeah. But I spent a year on Twitter until I could stand it no more, and I spent about a year on. Actually, it was Chris Walker and James Whittam who stuck me on Twitter against my will, and after about a year. You always get one or two venomous things come on. I just thought, oh really, I don't need this. And then, because there's always people that can't stand what you do. I mean, it's a matter of fact that's going to happen. And then I think it was my daughter put me on Facebook, and I stuck it for about a year. And I thought, do I really need to know about people's pets, holidays, meals out? I just don't need to know all this stuff. And I just thought, I'm off this. So. And then I was told about Burnicle's bingo, so it sounds immensely entertaining, but I don't know anything about it.
Well, the chap who asks actually runs a Twitter account called Burnicle Bingo.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
He was asking, does James actually feed you lines in order to try and get you to say something on the bingo card? And I asked James earlier, and his response was, he said, no, I never have to, because Jack comes out with, well, everyone's got their own catchphrases, haven't they? So he was quite happy to say he didn't have to.
I come out with rubbish without any encouragement. Yeah, to my knowledge, he'd never done that. He's never mentioned that to me as And you know, he's a decent bloke. I don't think he'd deliberately lead me down the garden path. So I lead myself quite handily down the garden path, to be honest.
Well, you know, speaking to people here, and all the people I speak to in the Superbike paddock, they are, you know, I've not met anybody who's not a huge fan of your commentary, you and James, and they believe that you guys make the race so much more entertaining. What you've got is a real skill and a real ability just to draw people in. You know, I would challenge someone to be walking past a television where they can hear the commentary and not be drawn in by what you say. So although there are venomous people out there, I wouldn't listen to them. I would just imagine they're a little bit jealous of what's going on.
I don't know whether jealous is the right word, but what I love are the characters in the sport, because they're, no matter how quite... Look, did you hear that post-race interview of Taylor Mackenzie? Did you hear that Midlands accent he stuck on, where he just turned into Michael Rutter Mark II? That was just so brilliant. Some of those kids are so entertaining, so sharp. That was pure magic. I mean, with characters like that in the paddock, we can't go wrong, really, can we? I don't know.
You did something very English there. I gave you a big compliment and you dodged it and praised someone else. But there we are. That's what we do as the English, don't we? Right, final one from Colin. His question was, do you ever get recognised shopping in Tesco's?
Yes, it does happen now and then.
Is it because I hear you first?
But sometimes, no. Occasionally it's the face, but quite often it's the voice. It's not necessarily Tesco's. It's happened in
Waitrose?
It's happened in the Rhino House at Chester Zoo. It's happened in it happens in various oddball places where you suddenly get a voice saying Mr. Burnicle.
From the Rhino.
And down on the prom near where I live on the banks of the River Mersey opposite Liverpool, and it's happened along the prom there, and all sorts of weird places. Yes, quite regularly. Yeah.
Lovely. Listen, Jack, thank you very much for joining us again. It's always a pleasure to hear your take on what's going on in British Superbikes and elsewhere. Thank you very much. That is Jack Burnicle. Thank you.